Aloha. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. You can go to live in France, but you cannot become a Frenchman. You can go to live in Germany or Turkey or Japan, but you cannot become a German, a Turk, or Japanese. But anyone from any corner of the earth can come to live in America and become an American. Welcome back to A Nation of Immigrants, a talk show program featuring the lives of immigrants, knowledge, diversity, and inclusion, created by ThinkTech Hawaii and the Kingsfield Law Office. We invite renowned immigrants and descendants of immigrants to discuss their life stories, their family history, immigration adventures, and their contributions to cultural diversity. Today's guest is our very good friend, Susan Cohen. Welcome, Susan. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks so much, Chang. It's so good to be here with all of you.
Thank you. This show is so honored to have you, the best immigration attorney in the United States. And we are honored to have you sort of back to the show because you were our guest on the Middle Way, the predecessor of A Nation of Immigrants in 2021. Yes, and we have the great honor to discuss your book, fantastic book on the immigration history and the stories of immigration trials, and their contributions, journeys from there to here. So we are very honored to have you back on the show. And this time we are not talking about your clients, and we're not talking about their contributions. Instead, we are going to talk about your contributions to the immigration law and the cultural diversity. If you don't mind, we have a very short bio I would like to share with our audience about you. Susan is a leading immigration lawyer in the United States, the recipient of dozens of awards by prominent organizations and the founding chair of Mintz Levin's immigration practice. In 2017, Susan helped to lead a Mintz team that worked with American Civil Liberty Union, ACLU of Massachusetts, and others to obtain a temporary restraining order, TRO, on the Trump travel ban. Through her pro bono work, she has helped many immigrants obtain asylum and green cards. In her newly published book, Journeys from There to Here, Stories of Immigrant Trials, and Contributions, Susan speaks from the front line and shared her insights, honesty, and wisdom on the immigration system in the United States. Well, Susan, in my heart, I always thank you for all you do for immigrants, and obviously also for me. So we know each other for 13 years from 2010. And when you helped me with my immigration process, my family forever in debt to you.
It was an honor, Chang.
It's honor totally ours. You did even that we worked together just for a few months. I learned so much from you, your professionalism, your diligence, and most importantly, your compassion toward immigration law. So you really feel the immigrants' cheer and happiness and pain and suffering, which I think is very, very important. One of the best things that a lawyer can offer to the clients is to listen to their pain and suffering. Anyway, I do have a list of questions I want to ask you, even we know each other for many, many years. But my first question to you is, do you know how your ancestors arrived in America?
Yes, so, I actually researched it, and we have a family genealogy that's quite interesting. I can recount from my mother's side of the family much better than my father's side. But on my mother's side of the family, my great-great-grandfather immigrated through Castle Garden in New York, which was the predecessor to Ellis Island in New York, where they processed immigration from about 1855 to 1890, it was the only processing center for immigrants in the United States, and it was in New York, down in the bottom of New York near the harbor, not that far from where Ellis Island sprung up. And my great-great-grandfather and his family had come from Lithuania, and they came from a little town there that was predominantly Jewish, and because I'm Jewish, my ancestors were Jewish, and right before my great-grandfather came over, the year before that, this area was part of Lithuania. Then it changed sovereignty many times over the course of the years, but at that time, it was governed by the former Russian state, and they had enacted these very, very prejudicial anti-Semitic laws at the time, the year before they came, called the May Laws, which basically stripped the Jewish people in that community of their right to carry out most types of professions, to go to school, et cetera. They were squeezing them. They're trying to get them out of the country, and it worked. And so there was a huge, huge mass emigration after that. And my great-great-grandfather came in the very initial immigration from that, and landed in New York and made a life for himself there. And one thing led to another, and here I am. Right?
Thank you so much for sharing that. And your ancestors obviously made the best, choice. But one quick comment: I never understand the anti-Semitism. I researched, I studied history, and from the history to today, there's almost always anti-Semitism somewhere in the world, very unfortunately. But I just can't understand it. Is there any reason behind it? I couldn't find any reason really behind that.
Well, I think we could spend hours discussing that subject by itself. So I think that we should put that on for the next time I come back.
Absolutely. Yes, I very much look forward to it.
It's a very complicated topic. Yeah.
I know. It's but I have so many Jewish friends. My graduate mentor is Jewish, and you're Jewish. And I honestly never met some Jewish people really give me trouble. And anyway. But let's move on.
There are a lot of myths that are circulated in the world that foment ideas that are not true, that divide people from each other.
Exactly. Yeah. And just borrowing the dictator's playbook, if you just keep lying for 1,000 times, and people accept it, and so that's just the human nature. Let's move on to the next question. And you were born in Boston?
I was born in New Jersey, right outside of New York City. So most of my family stayed in that area after my great-grandparents emigrated there, and I was born there and went to law school outside of Boston. I went to undergraduate school outside of Boston, and went back to New York for my law degree, and then came back to Boston and settled here right after I graduated from law school. Yeah.
Wow, obviously Boston is a ACLU city right now. And could you tell us about I know some lawyers and judges. Very few of them choose immigration law as their ultimate career path. And if you practice business law, corporate law, sometimes you have to work with the immigration law, the system. But for them, and for even in law school, we always have this saying that there are two areas of laws are very difficult to practice because they are extremely complex, inconsistent, and keep changing. That's tax law and immigration law.
Yes.
So from your did you already determine you're going to become the best immigration attorney in the United States when you went to law school.
Absolutely
And
not. I had no idea that I would end up practicing immigration law, as a matter of fact. It was very far from my mind when I went to law school. Yeah. I had some exposure to immigration law before law school, having worked as a paralegal for a couple of different immigration lawyers. And I only got those jobs by chance because the first lawyer advertising was looking for someone who was fluent in Spanish because she had a clientele from Central America and South America, needed someone to help in the office who could translate and interpret for her. And I was fluent in Spanish, so I applied for that job. And it was totally by chance I got exposed to immigration law there. And I saw the plight of some of the applicants for political asylum in that setting, who were in a lot of difficulty because they were sometimes detained, even then, back in the early 80s, by the immigration system, did not have the capacity to pay bond, to be released from detention pending their asylum hearing. So when I was very young, even before I went to law school, I was so concerned about the inequities in the system that I actually did some community activism at the time to raise a bail fund to help the people in detention. So that was really important to me when I was very young. I was 22, 23 years old at that time. That's how I got exposed to some of the issues in immigration law. But then I went to law school not thinking that I would be an immigration lawyer, Chang. No, I thought I would be a litigator. I was raring to get into court and fight for people's rights. But I joined my law firm, Mintz, in 1985. And I started doing some of the corporate work and the litigation work. But I also had a chance to work on an immigration case that randomly came into our office. And it happened to be for an incredible artist. I might have told you the story before, I don't remember.
Yes.
And he was a potter. And I got to make a case to the government for him that he should be accorded a green card status, which is what he really wanted, to stay with his family in the States and not go back. He was on an exchange visitor visa, J1 visa, didn't want to go home to Japan. He wanted to make a life for him and his family in the States. And so I was able to research a pathway, which was really fun and intellectually stimulating and challenging to try to find a way for this gentleman to stay. I knew nothing about immigration law, really. I had not done anything like that before in my life. But the maze of the system, I found it actually very intellectually stimulating to try to find my way through the maze of those laws that you're talking about, how complicated they are. And they're even more complicated today than they were then. But it worked, and it was very gratifying. And I realized that in comparison, the feeling of satisfaction I had in winning that status for him and his family, celebrating with him and his family afterwards, and seeing the joy and and the incredible gratification on their part, and also and feeling it in myself that I really made a difference in someone's life, really spurred me to want to try to focus on immigration after that.
Bravo.
And this is that case.
Wow.
And it's my very first case, and I've always kept it bound ever since then as a reminder for how I became passionate about helping people through the immigration process, and that was what I wanted to devote my career to doing.
Very well said. Thank you so much, Susan. It's a lovely story, and I'm very glad you were able to help the gentleman and the family. You change the family's life forever.
Yes.
So when I practiced immigration law, when I was able to obtain favorable adjudication from the immigration authority, and
Yes.
I can feel the happiness and hope of the family. And so that is probably the best reward as an attorney we can get from our practice.
Yeah, I can't think of any more satisfying type of legal practice personally than helping people find their place where they really want to be and be able to launch their lives anew,
Mm-hmm.
with that safety and confidence. It's meaningful work.
Absolutely. And I want to thank you again for obtaining the TRO against the travel ban. And I was teaching constitutional law that semester. And when the travel ban was issued, and we were obviously, the students and I and my colleagues were totally appalled.
Yeah.
And on one hand, when you try to get somebody come to the United States, legally stay here, and that is one side of story. The other side of the story is if the people already here legally and for some reason, administrative reason, and they were being kicked out, and you were able to help them with ACLU and your team to ban the implementation of the travel ban and helped so many families. They are already here. So this
Yes.
this ban was not only affected one family, they're affecting thousands of families already in the United States.
Yes, tens of thousands of people. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes. And that's the thing about using the courts that is so important, that at least in the United States we have the ability to challenge the government, and make sure that the actions undertaken by the administration comply and comport with the Constitution and the enacted laws of the United States. It's often a pitched battle, but at least we have the ability to do that here. In some countries, it's much more difficult.
Obviously, yes, I totally agree.
Yeah.
Then we have, I think the next question make perfect sense to ask, and this question is from the ThinkTech Hawaii CEO Jay Fidel, our good friend Jay. Jay said, please ask your guest, what does your experience with U.S. immigration law, either positive or negative, teach us about our system, the nation, and a nation of immigrants?
I saw that question from Jay and I smiled, and I'm smiling again now just because it's like tapping a vein. It's such a rich subject area. And we could also go on for a very long time about the challenges and both the negatives and positives of our immigration system based on my experience of the past 40 to 45 years. I have a lot of opinions on that topic, as you might imagine.
Well, that's right. And first, I recommend everybody read your books, and you share a lot of insight in your book. And we co-authored a BBC opinion piece op-ed and talked about the immigration, and you did share some of your insights and comments as well. And
I would just say, there's some positive aspects to our system, but there are a lot of aspects to our immigration system that need to be improved. Our laws need to be redesigned. They're out of sync with the current economic and civil aspects of society in the United States and the world. Our systems are not transparent. We don't allocate enough resources to the hiring of enough officers to be able to process cases fast enough. It's very slow, especially since COVID, very long backlogs. We have a lot of issues in the implementation. At the same time, the United States is a wonderful country, and in comparison with many other countries, our system, compares favorably to many other countries' immigration systems, but there's a lot of room for improvement. And another day I could go on and list many more areas of improvement that I think we should focus on, but I'll leave it at that for now.
Well, it's a terrific summary already, and really appreciate that. But I do have one particular question I do want to ask you. And as an immigration attorney, practicing immigration law for, 40, 45 years, and even I have practiced immigration law for over 10 years, I feel like, there are many, many, you know, things I can comment on, but there are two particular issues I want to hear your comments. One is, do you feel it's really challenging when you advocate for your client who is outside the United States, and it's virtually impossible because they are not protected under our Constitution? They do not enjoy due process or equal protection because they are physically outside the United States. I found it's just so frustrating to try to help somebody outside the United States, and
Yes,
that's one particular challenge I feel it. And
I agree with you.
you thank you, and I know you feel my pain as well.
Yeah.
And once the people is inside the United States, our Constitution confers so much protection, and we can argue under our legal framework. But if the individual is outside of the territory, it's just so like Sisyphus
Yes.
challenge, impossible to tackle. Uh,
It's much more challenging to help people who are outside of the country for that reason, and
mhm.
logistically too, as well, because it's very difficult to communicate effectively with the people who have control over the fate of that person,
Yeah,
uh, and getting to the right person at the embassy, uh, and getting them to respond when they are also terribly understaffed, Chang,
yeah, that's
and
true.
the ranks have been greatly diminished in the State Department. For example, there was a very serious exodus of people during the Trump era, and it's very slow to rehire and get people trained, pass background checks, and back into those embassies and consulate.
Hmm.
So, there are not enough people. They have a tremendous volume to deal with, and it's hard to get their attention. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I totally agree. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
your illustration. Well, then lead to my last heavy question, and the second, and then we move on lighter questions.
Okay.
My second challenge, and also, coming from you, when I listen to your comments about immigration law practice, is one particular issue I run into is sometimes the case adjudicator and consular officers, they were given, under the current legal system, they were given tremendous discretion.
Yes.
And I think this discretion is so flexible. Uh, Sometimes you are basically have to deal with individual officer instead of the law. And I
Yes.
have this feeling. I just want to hear your quick comments on that as well.
Oh my goodness, Chang. I think you hit the nail on the head there. Was thinking about that issue quite a bit earlier today, and thinking about the tremendous amount of discretion that the officers get to exercise. For example, in the even in the visitor tourist visa application process, right?
True, so
Where
true.
our immigration law presumes immigrant intent in the law for most applicants. And
Hmm.
so it's up to each person anywhere in the world applying for a visitor visa to the US to prove that they do not have it. So they have to disprove. So they have to prove the negative.
Yes.
And it's very, very, very difficult to disprove immigrant intent. And, like in the last years that we have data, back to, I think, in 2018, the last data I saw was there were something like 5 million tourist visa denials in that year alone.
Wow.
Um, and that's all over the world because the officers don't have much time and they err on the side of denying, especially after 9/11, they err on the
Hmm.
side of denying. So the discretion gets exercised very randomly by different officers, but oftentimes it's it's decided before the person even like opens their mouth to speak at the window in the embassy, unfortunately. Decided against them. Yeah.
Wow. Thank
Yeah.
you for telling me that. I knew it was a large number, but 5 million, that's really stunning.
Yes.
We should move on to a lighter questions.
Okay.
It's there are plenty of heavy questions already today. And so my first question is, how many you have worked as the immigrants all over the world? But
Yes.
personally, how many countries you have traveled, and which country is your favorite? You don't need to say China, just but
I loved my trip to China. I just reviewed my list. I think I've been to 42 countries so far.
wow.
Yeah. Many more that I would like to visit. Um, and I have enjoyed so many of them. Trips to Asia,
Hmm.
um, Africa, Australia, New Zealand. I'm very fond of mountainous places.
Hmm.
The Patagonia in Chile. I saw the pandas in China,
Yes.
in
Yes.
Chengdu. The mountains there with the mist across the mountains in the early morning and late in the day is magically beautiful. So
Mm.
many places in the world are beautiful, and I enjoy the culture of so many countries, but I also really, really particularly love to be in nature all over the world and to see the magnificent planet that we have. Yeah.
Beautifully said.
Yeah.
I was very happy to see you in China in 2018, and I very much look forward to welcome back to China
Thank
in the
you.
near future.
It was a wonderful experience.
I'm very glad you enjoyed it. We are
Yeah.
almost running out of time, but normally we end our show with two generic questions
Yeah.
to our guest. One is, if you were to give some advice to a younger you, time travel permits, you can travel back 40 years, and what advice would you give to yourself? And the second question is there any particular book or movie you are enjoying at the moment you want to recommend to our audience?
Okay. Well, it might not surprise you because you know me quite well, Chang, that maybe I would have said to my younger self that maybe I didn't need to work uh, 80 hours a week. I could have
Oh,
maybe settled for maybe 70 or 75. I was worked very long hours in my career and very committed to my clients and my work, as you know. So maybe I could have told myself to lighten up just a little bit on my work schedule, but
good advice.
it's okay. Um, there's a really great book that I've been rereading that I highly recommend to anyone, especially anyone interested in international law,
Mm.
which is called East West Street. Don't know if
East,
you've heard of this book,
oh,
but
East
it's
West Street.
by a very prominent British, I believe, international lawyer named Philip Sands, and he chronicles the lives of two people who happened to have been born almost in exactly the same place, but didn't really know each other, but lived
Oh
parallel
yeah,
lives.
yes, yes.
Yes, Hirsch Lauterpacht and Raphael Lemkin. They were both Jewish individuals who came from what is now Poland. Actually, now it's actually part of Ukraine, but was then Poland, before that, the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Their families were persecuted independently. They didn't know each other. They became very prominent lawyers and legal thinkers. And Hirsch Lauterpacht actually came up with the idea and invented the concept of crimes against humanity.
Yes, yes.
And Raphael Lemkin actually came up with the concept of genocide. He actually coined the term
Mm-hmm.
genocide based on what he had observed and learned about growing up in Europe during pre-World War II and World War II. And, it's a fascinating account of how these two men operating independently, yet remarkably from the very same small town,
Mm-hmm.
um, one in England and one in the US, separately helped to actually frame these incredibly important concepts in international law that were adopted, used in the Nuremberg trials, and then adopted by the United Nations, and have set the basis for all of these issues going forward, which are so important, as we've seen through all the world, to bring governments to account and dictators to account for crimes against people and groups. So it's a fascinating book. Highly recommend it. East West Street.
Thank you, Susan. This fantastic recommendation. I heard of the book, and I'm definitely going to order the book right away after our show. Well,
Okay.
we are running out of time, but I have so many questions I want to ask you, and I definitely want to invite you back to the show. And because this is a nation of immigrants, and you would be the perfect guest, and you will be our perfect host if you are interested to host this show. Well, thank you. Thank you again, Susan. It was a great pleasure, and I wish you a wonderful spring, and I look forward to having you back on the show. Thank you.
Thank you. You too. And thanks to all of you. Good to see everyone.
Good to see you again.
Thank you so much for watching ThinkTech Hawaii. If you like what we do, please like us and click the subscribe button on YouTube and the follow button on Vimeo. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and donate to us at thinktechhawaii.com. Mahalo.